It started with an envelope. No return address, no markings, just a plain, creased manila envelope dropped into the mailroom of a mid-tier magazine in Manhattan. The intern who found it almost threw it away with the junk mail, but something about the weight made her pause. It wasn't paperwork. It was a photograph. When she opened it, the smell of dust and old paper came out first, the smell of a box that hadn't been touched in years. Inside was a single, slightly faded photo, printed on glossy film stock. It showed a man, younger, sharper, his hair windswept by the wind of a construction site. Donald Trump. No suit, no crowd, no camera flashes. Just him, standing in the dirt of an unfinished skyscraper, holding a small child in his arms. The background was chaos, cranes, steel beams, men in hard hats. But the focus was crystal clear, a moment of stillness between a builder and a child who shouldn't have been there, her thin hand resting against his collar. She was smiling, not wide, but soft, like she was trying to reassure him. The photo looked real. Too real. The kind of real that doesn't belong to headlines. The intern took it to the editor's desk. He lifted his glasses, looked at it once, and said quietly, "Where the hell did this come from?" Nobody knew. There was no signature, no photographer credit, no note. Only a faint pencil mark on the back. 1989, Midtown. By the end of the day, the photo was lying under the glass of the editor's desk, and every person who saw it asked the same question. Not if it was real, but why it felt like something he had never wanted anyone to see. The photo made its way through the office like a rumor. By noon, it was on every editor's desk, passed from one pair of hands to another with the same question whispered under breath. Is this real? No one had seen Trump like that before. No suit, no stage, no walls of gold or microphones. Just a man in dusty clothes, a construction helmet tucked under one arm, and a sick child balanced carefully in the other. There was no slogan, no reporters, no audience. Only wind, sunlight, and something that looked too genuine to be staged. By early afternoon, 3 senior editors were standing around the conference table, arguing. "This isn't a story," said one, tapping the print with his pen. "It's a snapshot from a private life. You publish this, you make him human, and that's not what sells." "But that's exactly why it's a story," replied another. "You show a side no one's seen before." The editor-in-chief listened silently, his hands clasped behind his back. He'd covered Trump for decades. The speeches, the towers, the scandals, the smirk that had built an empire. But this photo didn't fit the pattern. It felt off. Not in a bad way. Just real in a way he didn't expect. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Find out who took it. If it's real, we'll talk." The staff scattered. Phones rang. One intern searched archives from the late 80s, scrolling through rolls of film shot on construction sites. A junior reporter called every freelance photographer who'd ever worked near Midtown back then. Nobody claimed it. Nobody remembered it. By 5 o'clock, someone suggested it might have come from Trump's own archives. Maybe a leak, maybe an old employee trying to make a point. "Then why no message?" the editor asked. "Why send it like this?" No one had an answer. As evening settled over Manhattan, the office emptied, but the photo stayed on the table under a single desk lamp. The face of a man who had been many things, but never this. And on the back, that faint handwriting in pencil. 1989 Midtown. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just a frozen second from a life that suddenly felt like it wanted to be remembered. The story began to grow legs. Someone leaked that the photo existed. A single shot of Trump no one had seen before, taken decades earlier on a dusty construction site. The rumor spread through media circles like electricity. A softer moment, a real moment, the man behind the empire. By noon the next day, reporters from other outlets were calling the magazine, asking for confirmation. One claimed to have seen a similar image years ago. Another swore it was fake, some kind of digital manipulation. But when the editor held the photo under bright office light, the glossy surface showed the age, fingerprints, smudges, small tears along the edge. It was real film. It had lived a life in someone's drawer. That night, one of the oldest staffers, a journalist who'd covered Trump in the 1980s, stayed late in the office, staring at the print. "I remember that site," he said finally. "He was building the tower on 57th. I covered it. But that day, no cameras were allowed." He paused. He didn't like being seen like that. Ever. They started digging through the archives, old newspaper clippings, rolls of undeveloped negatives, boxes labeled Trump 1988 to 1991. Most of it was familiar: ribbon cuttings, charity dinners, staged photo ops. But not this. Never this. When one photographer finally called back, his voice was hesitant. "I didn't take it," he said, "but I heard about it. Some worker's kid had cancer." He led her onto the site for a few minutes. Someone snapped a picture, maybe one of the crew. He lowered his voice. "They said he told people not to talk about it. Didn't want credit." The editor leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "So it's real," he said quietly. "And he wanted it gone." For a while, nobody spoke. The photo lay between them on the table, soft light catching the child's smile, the grit on his sleeve, the way his eyes weren't looking at the camera, but at her. It was simple, human, disarming. Someone finally asked the question that changed everything. What happens if we show the world this version of him? And for the first time in his career, the editor wasn't sure whether that was the right thing to do. The morning the magazine decided to move forward with the story, the editor's phone rang before sunrise. Private number. Manhattan area code. He answered groggily, expecting some junior reporter calling in sick. But the voice on the other end was sharp, low, and unmistakably trained to control a room. "This is Donald Trump's office." There was no greeting, no pause. "We understand you're in possession of a photograph. You will not publish it." The editor sat up straight. "Who am I speaking to?" "You don't need a name," the voice said. "Just know that Mr. Trump values his privacy. That image was never meant for public use." He tried to sound calm. "If it's authentic, it's history. People deserve to see. History," the voice cut in, "is what Mr. Trump allows to be remembered." For a long second, neither spoke. Through the window, the city was waking up, traffic humming, light bouncing off glass towers. The editor looked at the framed covers on his wall. Scandals, politicians, bankruptcies, wars. And he wondered if this quiet phone call might become one more story of control, of how power edits the truth before it ever reaches print. When he hung up, his assistant was standing in the doorway, holding a note. "Sir, someone from his team came by. They brought this." The envelope was thick, white, embossed with gold edges. Inside was a single typed line. "Some moments are private for a reason." And at the bottom, no signature, just the embossed initials D.T. By noon, the editor's inbox was full of emails, PR agents, lawyers, even acquaintances he hadn't heard from in years, all politely warning him to reconsider. No threats, no lawsuits, just that polite tone of people used to getting what they want. He walked back into the meeting room where the staff waited. The photo sat in the middle of the table, silent and fragile. He looked at it for a while and said, almost to himself, he could have just let it go. Nobody would have cared. But now, he gestured toward the photo. Now it's a story. It only took one person, one anonymous staff member with a phone and a moment of quiet rebellion. By the time the editor's team met again that evening, the photo was already online, a blurry scan, cropped at the edges, posted to an anonymous forum with the caption, "Before the spotlight." Within an hour, it had been reposted on Twitter, Reddit, and a dozen gossip accounts. By morning, it was everywhere. Cable networks replayed the image between political commentary and stock reports. News anchors used soft voices, the kind reserved for tragedies or miracles. The photo wasn't flashy or shocking. It was quiet. And that was exactly what made it impossible to ignore. A construction site, sunlight breaking through the dust. Trump, younger, sleeves rolled, holding a child who looked too weak to stand. No photographers, no press line, just one man and a kid, framed in accidental grace. Comment sections filled with disbelief. Is this real? Never thought I'd see him like this. He actually looks kind? The more people doubted it, the faster it spread. Some claimed it was staged, AI-generated propaganda. Others swore they remembered the story. A sick worker's daughter who'd been given a hard hat and a smile. Inside Trump Tower, his media team scrambled. They called it a privacy breach, issued short statements, denied the authenticity without directly saying it was fake. But behind closed doors, Trump had already seen it. The photo lay on his desk, freshly printed, its corners trembling slightly in the air conditioning. He didn't speak for several minutes, just stared. His assistant broke the silence. "Should I have it taken down, sir?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the child's faint smile, and on his own face, a version of himself that looked both unfamiliar and frighteningly honest. Finally, he muttered, almost to himself, "They weren't supposed to see that." Then, quieter, "Not like this." And for the first time in a long while, he looked not like a man controlling the story, but like a man realizing he was the story. By sunrise, the internet was on fire. Every platform, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, had its own version of the story. Some said it was proof of humility. Others claimed it was staged decades ago for PR. But the truth didn't seem to matter. What mattered was that the world had just seen Donald Trump in a way no one had before. Morning shows debated it endlessly. News anchors used slow, deliberate tones, that rhythm they reserve for events they can't quite explain. Panels of analysts dissected his expression. "Look at the eyes. They're soft, unguarded." Psychologists weighed in. PR experts speculated. Even his critics admitted, reluctantly, it's different. Then came the human stories. A former construction worker tweeted, "I was there. That girl was the foreman's daughter. She had leukemia. He carried her so she could see the skyline. That's all it was." The post went viral in minutes. Thousands of comments flooded in, not about politics, but about kindness. About moments people had seen, then forgotten. About what fame hides and what time erases. By noon, the photo wasn't just an image anymore. It was a mirror. Some saw redemption, others manipulation. But everyone was talking about the man, not the brand. Inside Trump Tower, the atmosphere was tense. Phones rang nonstop. Advisors paced the marble floor. The PR team drafted 3 statements and deleted all of them. No one knew what tone to take: deny, confirm, or ignore. But in his office, Trump didn't say a word. He just watched the news replay the same image over and over. That frozen moment of dust, sunlight, and a child's quiet smile. For the first time in years, the cameras weren't his, and he couldn't control what they showed. By mid-afternoon, Trump Tower had turned into a command center. The top floor buzzed like a newsroom. Advisors, publicists, assistants, everyone talking at once. Screens displayed headlines. The photo they weren't supposed to see. Donald Trump, the unexpected side. A dozen TV channels played the same image on loop, dissecting every pixel. One commentator said it humanized him. Another insisted it was a distraction, a media ploy, but none of them could explain why it felt so different. His communications director stood at the head of the table, voice sharp and quick. "We can't let this spiral. Either we discredit the image or we own it. There's no in-between." Someone else added, "Sir, if we frame it as charity, maybe you were visiting the girl, doing outreach." He raised his hand. Silence. Trump leaned back in his chair, eyes on the photo projected on the wall. The younger version of himself looked strange, not softer, but open, like a man who hadn't yet learned to guard every expression. There was no calculation in that face, no distance. Just a man, and a sick child who trusted him enough to smile. He spoke quietly, almost like he was thinking aloud. "She was the foreman's daughter. The doctors said she had weeks. Her dad begged me to let her come see the site." The room went silent. No one had ever heard him tell that story before. "I didn't want cameras," he continued. "Didn't want press. Just a moment." He paused, then looked up, his tone hardening again. "And now it's a headline." His PR chief hesitated. "Sir, people are responding to it, positively. You could." He cut her off. "I don't need to sell kindness," he said. "Not everything is a deal." For once, the room had no strategy. No one dared to speak. The man who built towers and stories was sitting in front of an image he couldn't rewrite. And maybe, for the first time, didn't want to. That night, long after everyone had gone home, the office on the top floor of Trump Tower was quiet. The city outside shimmered, 1,000 lights reflecting off the glass, stretching endlessly down Fifth Avenue. But inside, the only glow came from a single screen, the same photo, enlarged, filling the monitor. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, staring. It had been decades. The smell of wet concrete, the sound of drills and shouting, the way the sun hit the steel beams, it all came rushing back. He remembered the father first. A tall man with rough hands, hard hat tucked under his arm, eyes red from no sleep. He'd asked to speak to Trump personally. Said his little girl loved skyscrapers. Said she wanted to see the one that touched the clouds before she got too sick to leave the hospital again. Trump could have said no. He had every reason to. Liability, insurance, headlines. But something in the man's voice, that trembling mix of pride and desperation, made him pause. He told security to let them in. The next morning, the girl arrived. Tiny, pale, wrapped in her father's jacket that looked 5 sizes too big. She held onto his sleeve as they walked through the unfinished lobby. She barely spoke, just looked around, eyes wide, like she was trying to memorize every sound, every echo. He carried her up to the observation floor himself. The wind was cold, the view endless. "Is this your building?" she asked. He smiled, not the usual confident, camera-ready grin. "Yeah," he said quietly. "But today it's yours." She laughed, just once, small and bright. That was when someone snapped the photo. No flash, no posing, just a moment caught between concrete and sky. He'd forgotten how light she felt, how heavy that day had become afterward. She died a month later. Her father sent a letter that he never answered. And somehow, somewhere, that picture, the one he thought was gone, survived. Now, decades later, it was on every screen in the world. And for the first time in years, he whispered to the empty room, "I should have kept it." By morning, the story had outgrown the photo. Major outlets were running retrospectives, old interviews, timelines, anything connected to that one frozen image. Headlines called it the forgotten moment, the human side of Trump, the photo he tried to hide. But this time, the noise wasn't cruel. The world, for once, wasn't laughing or shouting. It was listening. People began sharing their own stories of small acts that had never made it to the news. Construction workers posted memories of him bringing coffee to the crew on cold mornings. A retired security guard wrote that he once paid a janitor's hospital bills without telling anyone. Old skeptics didn't believe it, of course, but disbelief didn't stop the conversation. For the first time, Donald Trump was being talked about not as a headline, but as a person. Talk show hosts analyzed every detail. The dirt on his sleeves, the tired but gentle look on his face, the child's trusting grip. It didn't matter what you thought of him. The image broke through something that years of speeches never could. At noon, one of the news stations tracked down the girl's father. He was older now, gray hair, soft voice. He confirmed the story. "She wanted to see the sky from his building," he said. "He made it happen. That's all there was to it." Then he added, almost shyly, he didn't want cameras. Said it should just be for her. The clip went viral instantly. Millions of comments poured in. Some praised him, some mocked, some argued, but the tone was different this time. Less anger, more curiosity. By evening, the hashtag the photo he tried to hide had reached every corner of the internet. Artists redrew the image. Journalists debated its meaning. And one tweet, short, quiet, and anonymous, got more likes than any of them. Maybe kindness isn't gone. Maybe it just doesn't like the spotlight. In his penthouse, Trump scrolled through the flood of reactions. No campaign manager, no lawyer, no spin team beside him. Just the hum of the city below. He read the words again and again. Then, without saying a thing, he locked his phone, leaned back in his chair, and for the first time in years, let the silence feel good. By the third day, every major network wanted him. CNN, Fox, BBC, even talk shows that once mocked him, all sending requests with the same headline pitch. Donald Trump breaks silence on the photo. Producers promised a human conversation. Publicists promised a chance to reclaim the story. But he ignored them all. Then one name appeared in his inbox, handwritten on an envelope this time, not digital. It was from the same magazine that had first received the photo. Inside, a simple note. "We don't want a statement. We just want to ask, what did that day mean to you?" No tricks, no cameras, no spin. Just one question that felt heavier than all the microphones in the world. He sat at his desk, staring at the letter. Outside, the skyline glowed. His skyline, the one he built and branded and sold to the world. He'd been asked thousands of questions in his life, about money, power, politics, fame. But none of them had ever made him pause like this. That afternoon, his communications director entered the office with a folder full of potential responses, official statements, pre-written lines, angles they could use. He didn't look up. "Tell them I'll answer," he said. The director froze. You'll do the interview?" He nodded slowly. "But on one condition," he added. "No cameras, no edits, just a conversation." For a man who had built his life around being seen, This was the first time he wanted to be heard without being watched. He placed the letter on the corner of his desk, next to the photograph, the original one, now framed but unpolished, edges still torn. His reflection in the glass was faint, but the child's smile was clear. Somewhere deep down, he knew. He wasn't answering a magazine. He was answering a moment that had been waiting for him for 35 years. They met in a small office, not a studio. No stage lights, no backdrop, no makeup team hovering nearby. Just 2 chairs, a voice recorder, and a man who had lived 100 headlines. Now sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table between them. The interviewer was young, polite, nervous, the kind of journalist who still believed in questions more than clicks. He began gently. "Mr. Trump, do you remember that day?" Trump nodded once. "Yeah, I do." His voice was steady, but softer than usual. "She was small," he continued. "Too small for that hard hat. Her dad kept apologizing, said she'd just wanted to see the building before." He stopped for a moment. The air seemed to tighten. Before she couldn't. He glanced up. "I told him she could go anywhere she wanted. So I took her to the top." He gave a half smile, not prideful, but remembering. "She laughed the whole time. Said the city looked like a toy." The interviewer hesitated. "Why didn't you want the photo published?" Trump leaned back in his chair, breathing slowly. "Because it wasn't for them," he said. "Not for the press, not for PR. It was a moment that belonged to her and her dad, and maybe a little bit to me." He tapped the frame of the photo resting on the desk beside him. "They think everything I do is calculated. But that day wasn't. That's why I tried to keep it to myself." The journalist didn't interrupt. The recorder's red light blinked silently between them, the only witness to a rare kind of truth. Finally, Trump said, almost to himself, "When you've lived your life in front of cameras, sometimes the only thing that feels real is what they don't see." The interviewer didn't know what to say. He turned off the recorder, and for a few moments, they just sat in silence. 2 people sharing a secret the world had already stolen. The next morning, the interview never aired. No leaks, no quotes, no headlines, just quiet. In his office, the framed photo hung on the wall behind his desk, unpolished, still torn at the edges. Visitors came and went, cameras flashed, but no one ever asked about it, and he never mentioned it again. Yet every once in a while, when meetings ended and the lights dimmed, he'd glance at it, and for a brief, rare second, he looked like the man in the picture,